All right. So one of the things that's become very clear these days as we talk to our customers is that no matter what your opinion of cloud, organizations are rapidly moving resources from traditional data centers into cloud. And you can go out to Google, whatever source of information you want to find some statistics. This one happens to be from Flexera. It talks about, where people are going with regard to the number of data centers that they have. And it's very clear if you read these numbers that our customers intend to either significantly or somewhat reduce the number of data centers that they're investing in going forward. And if you think about what that means for somebody in a DDI type of role, that means that all of the things that used to be resident in those data centers, your DNS servers, your IPAM, those things are probably going to start moving to the cloud as well. And so with this inevitable change, people start to feel a little bit uncertain about what's going to happen, right? So as things move out of the data center, am I still going to have visibility to them? Am I still going to be able to sort of put my controls in place around what's going on there? These become really big questions for DNS professionals that they really do need to answer. And of course, if you don't have the answers to those, your anxiety sort of comes to a higher and higher level all the time, because you really just don't know where you are in this migration. But there are tons of benefits to going to cloud that go along with some of these challenges that people see, and these are four critical challenges that customers share with us all the time about what's happening when things do move up to cloud. But again, before we jump into that, we should probably talk about the benefits, right? The reason why people are going to cloud is because it gives organizations a tremendous amount of agility, flexibility. It lets them do things a lot faster than they have been able to do in a traditional data center environment. So I want to before I get into the challenges, I want to sort of show you an example of that. One of the beautiful things of cloud is instead of going through massive change processes and acquiring hardware and having to rack and stack and cable and power that hardware, I can actually deploy infrastructure at will at any time via code. So I'm gonna deploy some infrastructure here, some BlueCat infrastructure that we're going to use in the later part of the webinar. It's going to take not very long to deploy, but let me go ahead and kick that off here. And I'm going to be using a tool called Terraform to do this. And if you go to our BlueCat Labs website, which we'll provide a link for, you'll be able to download this example code that I'm using. But basically, I'm just going to run a Terraform command here to deploy a BlueCat address manager, a BlueCat DNS DHCP server, a gateway server, and a test client up into an Amazon environment. So let me kick that off. All right. So now, while that's going, let's talk about some of these challenges. So the first challenge is really around this idea of visibility and control. So as things start to shift to the cloud, and as DevOps teams or whoever start getting the ability to deploy infrastructure rapidly, a lot of times the DDI team starts to lose visibility into what's actually being deployed, and of course that can cause a number of issues, right? So if people are deploying networks and infrastructure, signing IP addresses, updating DNS records, maybe overriding DNS records in the cloud, that has impact to the people who are working with those tools, and that could cause conflicts with things in my data center, things in other clouds, and so it's really hard for DDI teams to really maintain visibility into what's going on. And at the same time, if I'm deploying DNS out in Amazon or Azure and somebody else is managing that, I've lost control over that. So I don't really know how that configuration is being done. And if somebody maybe makes forwarding rule changes that conflict with something I've done in my data center, I might actually cause an outage. And that can have pretty massive impacts on everybody. The third thing we hear a lot is that teams just frankly feel left in the dust, right? As infrastructure starts to become more fluid, either the tickets are going to pile up and I'm going to have to do a Herculean effort to keep up with all the changes and make all the manual adjustments, or I'm going to kind of get left behind, right? People are going to orchestrate everything outside of this nice, stable, consistent DDI platform that I've spent a long time putting in place. So I need to be able to move as fast as the cloud teams if I'm going to sort of keep my place in this environment. And then the final thing we hear a lot, and I mentioned it a little bit before, is as we start to fragment out DNS and have little bits of it here and there and in this cloud and that cloud, I need to still make sure that my clients have a way to route through that. I need to be able to get to some resource in the cloud or in this data center in this remote office. And a lot of times, just because of the way DNS works, that becomes really, really hard. And I start to end up with this tangle of conditional forwarding rules and things like that to make sure that my clients can actually connect to things. And of course, anytime you add in those sorts of complexities, you have that risk of outages again, or at least clients not being able to get to what they need. So let's talk about these a little bit. We talked about this lack of visibility. I've got data centers and campus offices, and I've got, now cloud data centers in Amazon and Azure. When things get pushed out there, I still need to know what's going on, right? So BlueCat offers a solution that we're going to look at a little bit later called Cloud Discovery and Visibility, which allows you to actually connect to those cloud services and watch for changes in DNS configuration or network configuration there, and pull that information back into your address manager. So you'll have a up-to-date sort of real-time monitored view of what's going on all those clouds, so that you can make better decisions about how you're going to configure things or how you're going to allocate resources. So that's really the solution to this idea of getting visibility into what's going on, which maybe now somewhere else or somebody else is taking care of that. The second thing that we're going to talk about and we're going to show today is this idea of control, right? And as DNS goes out to these clouds, right? I've got my on-premises data center stuff. Really what I want to do is I want to be able to extend what I've been doing for a long time out into those clouds so that I can not just get visibility, but also take control of what's going on in those things. So being able to deploy things like address manager or DNS servers out into cloud and actually have my DNS data, my zone data out there so that I can still manage it from a central location is really critical to my success. So we're going to show you how we deploy services out there and deploy zone resource records and things of that nature out there. The next challenge that we talked about was, this ability to automate and orchestrate rapid changes. And we've already really kind of covered this one when I showed you, sort of how to deploy infrastructure with Terraform. But it's important to note that, deploying infrastructure and then getting visibility into changes sort of goes hand in hand, because you don't just deploy BlueCat infrastructure with Terraform. Your DevOps team, your Cloud Ops team, whoever it is, they're deploying all kinds of stuff with things like Terraform or other orchestration tools. So the more you automate, the more that visibility really becomes important. And what we'll show you during the rest of the webinar here is if somebody makes changes, sort of how that trickles down into address managers so that you have this real-time view. So we'll touch on that again during the demo. And then the final problem is as I talked about, this like tangle of DNS forwarding rules that need to happen to be able to connect all of these different instances of DNS. So if you think about a little bit of DNS in Azure and Google Cloud Platform and Amazon, some in your data center remote branch, sort of how do you make sure that your clients can intelligently route through that nest of DNS and find the right resources? So we're actually not going to go into detail on this one today. So if you join us for our next webinar on February 23rd, we're actually going to do more of a specific discussion and demonstration around how we can do intelligent DNS forwarding to make sure all this stuff stays connected. All right, so the challenges, right? Visibility, control, speed, simplicity. Those are really the challenges that people have, and the things that we're going to go into and sort of show in real life here in just a second, how we overcome those at BlueCat. All right, so let's switch over to the desktop here and actually see how this all really works. So here is the window from the Terraform script that I ran. And as you can see at the very end of the script, what Terraform has done here for me is it's spit out a bunch of information about the environment that I'm going to be working on. So down here in my terminal window, you see that I've got a BAM with a public IP that we're going to access. I've got a BDDS with a public IP and a gateway server that we're going to be using here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to dive into cloud discovery and visibility. So to do that, I'm actually going to have to go into BAM and set up a user and some user-defined fields to be able to get gateway to work. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this, go up here, head to my BAM. And again, this infrastructure has all been freshly built up in AWS, so nothing's been configured to this point. So I'm going to go ahead and accept that. Grab the password here, get logged in. And the first thing we have to do is we have to go over here and create a new object type. And it is a named user. Add one. I'm going to call this BlueCat Gateway. And this user-defined field basically is how we give permission to things within Gateway, so workflows within Gateway. So we have to create this user-defined field here. Just add that. And then we go back in and we actually create a user for Gateway. Go in here, create a user. Call this user Gateway. Give it a password that I can actually remember. Give it a email address because that's required. We're going to make this user an administrator. And I have to be sure to give both GUI and API access because all of the Gateway workflows are going to be using our BAM API. So I got to make sure I've got the right access type here. And then down here in my user-defined field, I'm going to just add this to all. So when I create permissions for my workflows, I'm going to add those workflows to all so that this user has access. So go ahead and add that. Get LastPass to stop popping up. All right, so we've got our BAM configured. So now let's go over to Gateway. So grab my public IP from my Gateway. And here, I'm going to log in using that user I just created. I remember the password. I did. All right, so now we're in Gateway. So now what we're going to do, just verify here that I've got myself pointed to the correct BAM. So 10.10.1.20, that's the one I just deployed. All right, you can see it right here, 10.10.1.20. I'm going to go into administration, go into workflow permissions. Here's my workflow that I've deployed using my Terraform script. So I manually, or I automatically push this workflow up. So I'm going to go ahead and select this and give it access to anybody that's got all there. And as you can see over here, that now appeared. So that means my user now has access to this. So here we go. Here's our discovery and visibility workflow for AWS. We have same thing for Azure, same thing for Google Cloud Platform. I'm just playing in AWS today. So to configure this workflow, now this workflow, just to summarize, is going to be going out to my Amazon environment, looking at the simple queue service within that AWS platform, and it's going to be monitoring for changes. So it's going to do discovery. It's going to pull in all of the information we tell it to, and then it's going to continuously pull for changes. And we'll see how that works here in a little bit. So to configure it, I need to give it my AWS access key, and I need to go grab my secret access key. I'm not using MFA in this environment, but if you're using MFA, you'd be able to put it in there. Go here and do configuration. So by default here, I'm doing everything in AWS US East 2. Which is going to create a configuration in BAM called US East 2 as well. I could override those if I wanted to, but I'm just going to leave it default for today. Go down to discovery options. Here's where I tell the workflow what I want to actually discover. So I'm actually going to discover all this stuff. Why not? Bring everything in. So EC2, Route 53 DNS, anything. And then it wants to know where I'm going to shove this. So I'm going to create a zone called team1.com in my BAM, where all of this information is going to get pulled. And then we'll actually be deploying that zone later. Go here in visibility. I'm going to enable visibility, and I'm going to update DNS. This update DNS one's important because what this means is if I see anything change in Amazon, I'm actually going to redeploy, do a selective deploy of that information to my BDDS that I'm deploying, right? So everything is going to actually stay in sync. Here I've got my gateway and my password for the API user. Paste that in again and use this one for my service account key. And here, this is not a standard part of this workflow. So this is actually for this custom version that we use for demos. So I'm just going to basically tell it which SQS in Amazon to use. So this is one I created using the Terraform. So that's it. I'm going to go ahead and hit start discovery. And you'll see up here at the top, it's going to tell you what it's doing. So it's discovering public blocks for US East 2, VPC, subnets, EC2 instances, elastic load balancers. So that's kicked off. And then we'll see up here at the top, it says visibility started. So what that means is the workflow has now done its initial discovery, and now it's actually polling continuously for information. All right, so let's see what happens here. So let's go back to the address manager and let's refresh this page. And notice a couple things. First, we have a configuration up here, US East 2, that's been created. And now if I go over to my devices, just as a way to quickly test, we can see that here are the things that I have deployed out in Amazon with my Terraform script. So this is the information that was initially pulled in by Cloud Discovery and Visibility. So before we go on, I'm going to customize this view a little bit here. And I'm going to add in name tag. Let's put in public and let's put in instant state and private. Oops, instant state. And let's do public DNS name. Why not? We'll do update. So here, as you can see, I've pulled in some additional information. So here are the name tags that I defined for these servers. And here's the DNS public name. Now that's on the devices. If I go into my DNS here, and if I drill down here into Amazon DNS external, here's team1.com. So again, here's the zone that I configured in the workflow. And here are all my resource records related to this. So you can actually compare these over here. 134, for example, look over here, and sure enough, that's the BAM public IP that was defined, right? So here's all of my stuff. Okay, so that was just step one. That's me pulling information in. But the cool part about this is it actually is updated in real time. So if I open up another window here, and I log in to this environment, which I probably should have done ahead of time. Logged in. So here's the AWS dashboard for this. If I go to my running instances, there are those servers. The neat thing about Discovery and Visibility is if I take one of these, like this test client, and I stop it, I'm going to go ahead and hit stop. Yes, and if I go back over here to Gateway, notice this info message here, EC2 change. And so it detected that I shut that down. So if I go back over here and I go over to devices, see how these all say running, 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 running? Let's refresh this a couple times. And look, it changed to stopped. So BAM is aware of the state of that thing. And now if I go back over to DNS, aha, it disappeared because I did dynamic update of this. All right, so I'm going to restart that thing just so it shows back up and we can use it later. But you can see that this is all working. We've got Discovery and Visibility running. It's polling for changes. It's finding updates, and it's updating our IPAM and our DNS. All right, so that's Cloud Discovery and Visibility. All right, now what we want to do is we want to take this one step further. Let me refresh this one more time. There's our test client again. It's back up and running. So what I want to do now is I actually want to go and deploy this zone that I've updated here to that BDDS that I deployed up in the cloud. So now I want to extend control of DNS out into Amazon. So I'm going to go here to my servers tab. I'm going to add a server. I'm going to call it BDDS because why not? Let's see, 10.1.10.10.1.30. Yep, that's what I've got here. So that's what I'm deploying to. I'm just going to call it BDDS. I'm going to put in my default password. Let's go down here and detect the server settings. Boom, it worked. All right, so it found that server that I had deployed via Terraform. I'm just going to go ahead and add that server. All right, there we go. Stop asking me to add things. All right, so we've got our BDDS. It's out there. Now let's go back to our DNS. Here we're in team1.com. So let's put in a deployment role. So let's add a deployment role. Master. Select that BDDS. Add that one. And we'll go ahead and add that. So we've got our deployment role. Go up here, select our server, and let's go ahead and deploy that zone to the server. All right, there we go. Okay, so what have we done here? Just to summarize. So we discovered all of this DNS data, right? And we found and we created these resource records. We're monitoring for these changes. So, the gateway workflow is constantly going out, looking at the queue, seeing if anything changes, add, stop, deleted, whatever. All of that is getting reflected into this zone. We've then taken this zone information, we've deployed it out to a BDDS that we deployed in Amazon. So now we have a server out there that can act as the authority for this information. So And that authority is going to be updated every time there's a change. So let's do a little bit of testing. So let me open up another terminal here and let's dig at this BDDS. Team 1, there we go. All right, so we do a dig and look, we get a no error and we get an answer. We get the answer for the public IP of this client. Now, keep in mind, for purposes of this demo, I'm using public IPs. It works equally well with internal IPs. It just depends on how you're doing your discovery and how you have things configured. But anyway, I get a response here, no error for this test 1 client. And again, let's just see what happens when I shut that thing down again. So if I go back in here, take this guy, let's stop him again. Yeah, stop him. Again, go here to AWS. Yep, we see that the thing changed. Let's go back here to our devices. Wait until this thing gets changed to stopped in BAM. And there, disappeared. First it stops, then it disappears. Depends on when you hit refresh. So it's gone from our devices list. If we go over here to our DNS, it's gone. Okay, and then remember, we check that, deploy changes. So this would then do a selective deployment to our BDDS. So if we go back over here to our environment and we do that same dig again, NX domain, record's gone. So AWS administrator stopped the instance, Gateway saw that change, Gateway updated BAM with the current status of that device. The DNS record, because that device was stopped, the DNS record got removed. And so anybody who is hitting that BDDS that we deployed now gets an appropriate response, which is NX domain. That thing is not here anymore. So now we've actually put together cloud discovery and visibility with deploying BDDSs to the cloud. So now I've got an authoritative server in Amazon that's going to have accurate, up-to-date information about everything that's happening in my environment in real time. Pretty cool stuff.